Good morning. I'm Hal Sirkin, and I'm a senior partner and managing director of the Boston Consulting Group, where I've been for the last 35 years. I'm also a professor at Kellogg. I lead the Boston Consulting Group's efforts in our Made in America program, and I've had the pleasure of working with Walmart on its Made in America program to reshore $250 billion of goods over 10 years. This is something that only Walmart can do. 6 years ago, the words reshoring didn't exist. 6 years ago, the goal was to get as much cheap Chinese-made manufacturing that you could procure from your contractors or your own Chinese plant and send it back to the US with a very attractive markup. It was easy pickings. Everything was cheap and the more was merrier. But a major shift was about ready to happen. Manufacturing costs were rising from a very low base. That was fine for 2001 when China entered the WTO because China's wages in their most productive areas were only 72 cents per hour, basically almost free. And the US benchmark in South Carolina was about $15 an hour. China wages were basically rounding error for US manufacturers. And the good times rolled to those who manufactured in China. But even China couldn't fight Adam Smith's invisible hand. Chinese wages were growing exponentially. What was 72 cents quickly became $2, and then $4, and then $6, and is now more than $6 today. But that's not the whole story. Wages in South Carolina grew from $15 an hour to $22 an hour. So it appeared that there would be a very big cost differential. But if you did the real math, you know that wasn't the case. Why? First, productivity. US manufacturing is 2 to 4 times as productive as the average Chinese plant. And that productivity gain goes a long way in making up for the real cost to be cheaper to manufacture in the US. Second is transportation costs, which are considerable, especially when you need a lot of packaging to make sure that your product gets to your customer safely after a 4,000-mile journey. And there's the intangibles that I know a lot of suppliers are getting used to or got used to, like having to talk to your supplier at 2 a.m. in the morning and waking up your spouse only to find out that the translation in China was wrong and you got the wrong product and everything else needed to be reworked. There are obsolescence costs for goods on the water that take more than 4 months to get to the customer but are obsolete when they arrive. There's the risk of losing your intellectual capital through theft and the lack of rule of law and many other issues. So today, if you look closely with many products, the all-in costs are about the same for goods that can be made in the US when the labor in China is $6 and the labor in South Carolina is $22. When labor costs are 72 cents, it's an easy choice. But when it's $6, it eats up much of the benefit, even with $22 an hour labor costs. Adam Smith's invisible hand helps force economies to adjust. And right now, we're near the end of this round of the version of play, which right now is making it harder for manufacturers to sell into the China market. The spread is just getting lower for Chinese manufacturing. Reshoring has become part of the normal course of business for most major companies. It is the new normal. It is so embedded in our economy that we no longer bother to track it. And we're seeing major European companies move production to the US for the US because the economics of manufacturing are very powerful. Initially, reshoring was viewed as a short-term issue, but we know now that it's actually a long-term trend. And the economics of US manufacturing are getting better, and the economics of Chinese manufacturer is getting worse as Adam Smith's invisible hands close that gap. So if you want to succeed as a manufacturer, you actually have to start looking at it as a very global perspective. We're in a here and there scenario. You need to be here in the US as a supplier, and you probably need to be there in Asian markets, which, including China, bought more than $2.5 trillion of goods in 2013, $2.8 trillion of goods in 2014, and $3 trillion in 2015. At the same time, China is slowing down to a growth rate of 6% and possibly down to a rate of 4% in the next few years. This means manufacturers will need to make big, long-term bets as to where they'll manufacture. And they may not be in the same locations as the wealth of the population of the world is shifting. And the US, which is still by far the largest consumer market, is free from many of the risks of the emerging markets, as the US is a very attractive place to manufacture for North America and even for export to Europe. And while there's still a lot of opportunity in the short term, the best companies are looking over the horizon to see what they need to do to succeed. And that requires looking long-term and understanding how you place your bets and where you place your bets, and making decisions that you'll be living with for the next 10 to 20 years. Now, we've seen some recent headwinds to US competitiveness. The dollar has strengthened, although not relatively that much. Freight is cheaper, which lowers container rates, but they are still at historic lows, and it's not making much of a difference. And global energy costs from shale oil and gas, which were at long-term lows, are now rising and moving to a $40 to $60 barrel range overall. But in spite of the headwinds, the US remains a low-cost market relative to other markets. Okay. You're looking at the chart that shows the Bcg Manufacturing Index in our latest version from 2015. The chart includes the top 25 manufacturing export nations. Sorry, 20 export nations. Our index shows that Belgium is the highest of the 20 companies at a cost at 120. Second is Brazil, but even with all the currency depreciation, they're still the second highest, and of course, one of the most corrupt. Germany comes in at 115. High cost to manufacture, but also high quality, and we all know that Germany's manufacturing commands a premium. Italy is at 114, which puts Italy in an expensive position. Sweden clocks in at 109, with Austria 1 point back at 108. Japan is 107, and so is the UK 107, although that will probably be changing soon when we can put in the next impact of the Brexit issues. And Canada is 106. So those are the high-cost countries in the index. Let's look at the lower-cost countries. The US is pegged at 100, the reference index. Poland is 98. China at 97, which I think people find surprising, but nevertheless, that is happening. And it's getting very close to the cost to manufacture in the US. Taiwan at 92. Russia, after a major currency depreciation, is now clocking in at its levels. Mexico clocks in at 90 as well, where we see manufacturing plants being set up for export from Mexico to the US, with a reasonable workforce, NAFTA, and proximity to the US. And very interestingly, if products are made in Mexico rather than in China, they have 4 times as much US componentry than similar products made in China. This is very important for US manufacturers and could be as much as 35% of value added. Over the last few years, manufacturers have been taking notice and moving components to the US. As you all know, it takes some time to do that. In 2012, we did our first reshoring survey. 7% of the people said that they were already reshoring, which was a bit of a surprise to us, but we welcomed it very nicely. 3% said that they would move production to the US in 2 years or less. 8% said that they would actively consider it, and 18% said that they would consider reshoring in the near future. When we repeated the survey in 2013, we found that 13% were already reshoring, up 6 points in only a year, and 8% said that they would move within 2 years. and 17% said that they're actively considering. In 2015, 15% said that they would probably consider doing it in the near future. 15% said they were looking at it. 7% said they would move in 2 years. And 17%, an amazing jump, were actually reshoring. Clearly, reshoring is happening and is on a long-term trend. If you look a little bit past the 2015, we did not do a survey in 2016, but we can see that between 2012 and 2015, the average amount of reshoring grew by 2.5 times in the 4-year period. We also did a deep dive on the benefits that companies have found when they reshored. 2 major benefits stood out. There are significant benefits from increased regionalization. Manufacturers were able to reduce the costs in their supply chains and were able to benefit from being close to their customers. This gave them much greater flexibility to reduce costs and make them able to serve customers more effectively as the supply chains became very nimble. These benefits are often overlooked because they're not actually directly tied to the P&L. And while they're closer to their customers, they're also closer to their workforce and understand what is going on in their businesses and their facilities. They had better quality, they had accelerated product development, as well as greater product innovation. The US is part of a global solution for non-US companies as well. We're seeing significant movement from European companies to produce in the US. These include companies like Siemens, Rolls-Royce, Airbus, and Toyota. Rather than exporting from Europe or Japan, these companies are building in the US for the long term because they believe that US manufacturing makes sense for them in the long run. No wonder why the just released FDI survey report saw a major gain, and it now stands at $340 billion of FDI for 2015. Much of that was from Europe, taking advantage of US manufacturing. 40% of the total FDI was manufacturing, and 1 in 7 sector jobs are tied to FDI. And even some Chinese companies are manufacturing in the US for the US. We all know that technology plays a major role for manufacturers. And we're seeing new manufacturing techniques that will allow manufacturing to be localized, requiring less transportation, and have quicker delivery. For example, rather than using traditional methods, you can use 3D printing, which can dramatically reduce the cost and cycle times for short-run goods. These allow manufacturers to customize products and produce products much faster than traditional methods. We're also seeing great leaps on the economic side using robotic technologies. Pioneered by the automotive industry, robotics are reducing the cost to manufacture because robots use Moore's law, the digital world, not the analog world, to create these products. This is creating a major sea change in how we manufacture products and will create great cost reductions for the manufacturers who learn how to take advantage of this opportunity. And just last week, the International Federation of Robotics said that purchases grew by 12% in this year, a major increase and one that is certain to continue to grow. And of course, the cost of robotics is dropping dramatically. For example, the cost of a robotic spot welder is about $8 an hour, while the cost of a human spot welder would cost $25 an hour. And robots are now not stationary, they actually can move. And they can do it in a safe way. So with the Baxter robot, we see humans and robots working together in safety. The robot can learn how the users work and adjust themselves to keep the humans working in the most productive manner. And some of these robots cost less than $25,000, an affordable cost for most at least middle manufacturers. And once you design that robot, you can store its program and call it back anytime you want, so long as you maintain the right configurations. This will allow unprecedented customization and will allow the US to be even more competitive. And because of digital technologies, these products will be made better, faster, and cheaper, and more customized to the needs of the consumer. The costs of robotics are falling fast, and manufacturers are now beginning to use other techniques like digital manufacturing to create full virtualization of automation production, which is going to have another wave of value for manufacturers. Let me stop here, and I'd like to introduce a Walmart supplier. He's been a Walmart supplier since 1990, and he's been a Walmart supplier that has very much benefited from reshoring. So let's give a big Walmart welcome to John Dannerman from Impact Innovations.
Good morning. I apologize, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I apologize for the scratchy voice this morning. You know, they asked me to stand up here and tell our story. To our product line in 2006. And our gift wrap line was always designed in the US and manufactured in China. In 2011, we acquired a gift wrap company based in Memphis, Tennessee called Clio. And Clio has been around for a long time, established in 1953, and was a domestic manufacturer of gift wrap. The previous owner had announced in May of 2011 that they were going to shut down the plant before the end of the year. And so in September, we acquired certain of the assets. We elected not to acquire their printing equipment as the presses they had 8 presses, all 30 to 40 years old and very inefficient by today's standards. So that meant we were going to continue to source 100% of our print production from China. And that's what we did. Then I was at the year beginning meeting in 2013 and learned of Walmart's US manufacturing initiative. I wondered whether we could bring back gift wrap production back to the United States. And so we started the analysis to determine whether we could either maintain or lower Walmart's store cost using domestic manufacturing. Our analysis showed that in fact we could compete with domestic manufacturing, but it would require a $7 million investment in printing equipment in our Memphis facility. And because our gift wrap, like most products, are kind of that business is earned on an annual basis, so we made the decision to approach Walmart and ask whether they would be willing to support us in a multi-year agreement to support our investment in domestic manufacturing. And Walmart said yes. We worked through the terms of an agreement, and in May of 2014, we signed our supply agreement. As part of that agreement, our commitment was to invest $7 million in printing equipment to ship 35% of the wrap that we sold to Walmart in 2015 from our Memphis facility, increase that to 50% in 2016, and incrementally each year thereafter. We installed our first press in June of last year, and we met our 35% commitment for 2015. Our second press was installed in January of this year, and we're on track to produce 58% of the wrap that we sell to Walmart in our Memphis facility this year. We also just last week finished the installation of an additional $3 million of equipment over and above the $7 million original investment to continue to increase our capabilities and capacity here in the US. So in closing, I guess I can't thank Walmart enough for our partnership and also for their support of our US manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We have hundreds of stories that sound like that. They are great things that we're doing not just for our businesses, but for our country. And I think we need to recognize a lot of the people who are doing all that hard work to basically take the risk and to move forward. And John, thank you so much for doing that. I don't have that. All right, well, I'm going to do without it. So speed and timing and all of this actually matter. And of course, as you all know, building a factory takes time if you have, even if you have local government help. Many manufacturers have begun this journey. They are beginning to reap the benefits of reshoring, which will allow them to reinvest in their businesses. But you need to invest now to reap the benefits. It can take 2 to 4 years, so if you're not moving now, you better get started or you'll be left behind. What does this all mean for the Walmart supplier? Reshoring is continuing, and new technologies are allowing companies to reduce cost and create benefits for their customers. You need to make sure that you know what the state of the art is and sort out what technologies and what capabilities you need to make sure that you can compete and succeed. You don't want to be outflanked from new technologies. How do you get started? Well, first, you start with the basic math, and you get a deeper understanding of the economics you have today and what they may be in the future. It may surprise you that you are basically going to reshore, and you didn't even know that you had the opportunity to do this. So look 20 years out, and you'll start to think about how this may work. Second, don't just lift and shift. Rethink your opportunities for the next 10 to 20 years and adapt. Putting a plan in the ground is expensive, so think wisely. Focus on what you want your value proposition to be for your long-term customers. Think wisely about where you want to be in the next 5 or 10 years, and think wisely about how you can get there in time and cost. The third is to enlist the support of the public sector. Getting them on your side can make a real difference. They also can be in the way sometimes, but mostly they do good things. Make sure that they are committed and understand your long-term vision, and they can be very helpful if you engage them in the right way. Fourth, engage your suppliers and customers in your journey. Give them information, let them know what you're doing, and enlist them to help. And fifth, make sure that you know your customers' propositions, so when your customer asks for them, they will be delighted with the outcome. There will be many changes in manufacturing over the next 10 years, and you will need to be nimble, and you will need to make sure that you stay ahead of the pack. Thank you, and I think we'll take some questions. No questions?
Specifically, what do you ask for with the public sector? What would you recommend? Say a small firm, $2 million, $10 million. What would you ask for? Local municipality, credit, or?
Yeah, it'd be things like tax rebates on things, because they have. You can do it any way, and it depends on which government you're talking to see what is best for them. The local ones, because I think they have the biggest skin in the game. If they can figure out the way to be able to do the things properly, then you'd probably have a much better thing, because they're really looking for it. As you saw, if you were here earlier, Asa Hutchinson, there's a lot of desire by governors and local officials to get that economic ball rolling, and that's what they need to do. So I would go to just about all of them and see what deals I can get. That's someone.
Have you looked into?
I'll get you a mic, sir.
Thanks.
I know everyone will want to hear your questions.
My question is about the Made in USA statement. Have you looked into the difficulty or the probability of, with the globalization of supplies, being able to meet that standard? What's the likelihood of industry being able to say Made in USA?
Yeah, so I mean, I like the idea of sort of partial Made in the USA at this point in time as a stepping stone to full Made in the USA. Some companies can do it right away. They may have that ability. but mostly they can't. So there's a group of, I can't remember the name of the group, but there's a group that basically has sort of 4 stars. The fourth star is the one that's 100% made in the US. The other one is probably 25% in the US, and they grade it that way. I think that's not the way we really want to go in the long term, but in the short term, it gives everybody the opportunity to be able to do all these things. Because it's 50% is much better than 25, and that's the great way to go.
Is Walmart actually putting a value on time in a supply chain? For example, an apparel item, can they actually capture the cost or the value of time by taking 30 days or how many ever days out of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have no idea what the answer is, though. I didn't get into that part of what Walmart does. I apologize.
You'd be welcome to direct that question to the Made in US team.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to your 1, 2, 3, 4 star, hi, as a follow-up to your varying degrees of Made in USA, the company I work for, we looked at that a while ago, and we have some offshore activities. We have a lot of onshore activities, and we had a difficult time finding a definitive ruling and ended up not doing anything because of fear of truth in packaging laws. Do you have any guidance for companies that we can find a definitive statement so we can have confidence that we're not going to do something wrong?
I'd love to, right? It's something that comes up all the time. You can see it in sort of how California does things, which is one way of doing it, but you're probably not only operating in California, where they have, I think, a little bit better, although not necessarily complete, definition of it. But there isn't a real US standard yet. I'm hoping that 1, 2, 3, 4 star thing would eventually take off. I think it's been underway now for about 2 years, and I haven't heard all that much about it beyond that. So it's disappointing. I think we need to go back to our public officials and start to, if we want to do this, start to get them in motion. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.